Bonjour tout le monde, merci d'être venu aujourd'hui. Si on avait dit il y a 8 ans que 9 sur 10 jeunes Canadiens allaient croire ne pas jamais pouvoir acheter une maison, ou que les jeunes allaient devoir vivre dans des centres d'hébergement lorsqu'ils font leur étude à une école postsecondaire, si on avait dit que 1 sur 5 Canadiens allait devoir manquer des repas parce que le coût de nourriture allait être aussi haut que ce soit maintenant. Si vous avez dit, il y a 8 ans, que 30 000 personnes allaient perdre leur vie à cause des surdoses des drogues dangereuses, et si vous avez dit, si on avait dit il y a 8 ans que le gouvernement allait décriminaliser la cocaïne, l'héroïne et d'autres drogues dangereuses, on aurait dit que c'est ridicule. On n'aurait jamais imaginé l'état dans lequel nous nous trouvons aujourd'hui. Tout est brisé ici au Canada. Et en conséquence, les Canadiens souffrent de façon psychologique. On a des taux de dépression plus élevés. On a une crise de dépendance des drogues dangereuses dans nos villes où on perd 300% plus de personnes aux surdoses qu'il y a 8 ans en Colombie-Britannique. Donc, il y a une désespérance et on devrait renverser les causes de cette désespérance au lieu de dire aux gens qu'ils devraient terminer leur vie. Mais c'est exactement ce que le gouvernement Trudeau propose. Il propose que dans moins d'1 an, le gouvernement va mettre en place des règles pour que les gouvernements fournissent l'aide médicale à mourir pour les gens dont la seule condition est la dépression ou d'autres santé mentale. Le Parti conservateur n'est pas d'accord avec cette approche-là. C'est la raison pour laquelle nous sommes ici aujourd'hui, avec le député Ed Fast qui a présenté dans la Chambre des communes une loi qui va empêcher l'aide médicale à mourir pour la santé mentale et la dépression. On a aussi la sénatrice Batters qui a travaillé depuis le début de sa longue carrière pour aider les gens qui ont de problèmes de santé mentale, pour sauver leur vie au lieu de mettre fin à leur vie. Plusieurs experts nous disent que la dépression et d'autres problèmes de santé mentale sont des problèmes qui peuvent être traités. Et il y a des moments où les gens veulent mettre fin à leur souffrance, mais qu'avec un traitement, quelques mois plus tard, ils pourraient être très reconnaissants de la vie qu'ils ont. Donc, il faut garder l'espérance et protéger leur vie. L'aide médicale à mourir n'est pas appropriée pour la santé mentale. Et c'est la raison pour laquelle j'annonce aujourd'hui mon appui pour le projet de loi de Ed Fast afin de protéger les vies de ces gens-là. Thank you very much for coming, everyone. If you had told us 8 years ago that 9 in 10 young people would believe they could never own a home, that 35-year-olds would be living in their parents' basements, that rent would have gone from, on average, $950 to $2,200, that the average mortgage payment would have gone from $1,400 to $3,200 in just 8 years, that young people would be living in homeless shelters while they go to university. If you had said that we'd have people, 1.5 million people going to food banks, 1 in 5 skipping meals altogether, some people going to the president of a Mississauga food bank and asking for help with medical assistance and dying, not because they're sick, but because life has become so miserable. If you had said that 30,000 people would die of drug overdoses and that the federal government's solution to that would be to decriminalize cocaine, heroin, and other deadly drugs, no one would have believed you. It would have been thought ridiculous to suggest any of those things could ever happen in Canada. Yet 8 years later, after 8 years of Justin Trudeau, everything feels broken. And people feel broken. That's why many are suffering from depression and they're losing hope. Our job is to turn their hurt back into hope, to give them faith that their lives can be better tomorrow than they are today, to treat mental health problems rather than ending people's lives. Yet the government says that in less than a year, it will be providing medical assistance in dying to people whose only condition is depression or mental illness. Experts tell us that depression and mental illness can come and go, that people can be suffering and desperate today, but a few months later, be thankful that they still have their lives and their families. Our role should be to give them that hope, to help them get through the valley and back to the mountaintop. And that is why I'm pleased to support the private member's bill of Member of Parliament Ed Fast that would ensure that medical assistance dying is not the solution to people suffering with their mental health. We also have here the senator from Saskatchewan, Senator Batters, who's devoted much of her senatorial work to giving hope to people who suffer from depression and to preventing suicide. She's continuing that work by supporting this bill. And so Conservatives will go forward to turn hurt into hope, to give people back control of their lives, to support their mental health, and to overcome addiction so that they can live good, happy, decent lives, as should be the Canadian promise. Thank you very much, and I now turn the floor over to Ed Fast to discuss his bill. Thank you.
Well, good morning, everyone, and thank you for attending this presser. It is my contention that the government has moved too far and too fast in implementing its MAiD legislation. My bill C-314, which is the Mental Health Protection Act, will reverse and revoke the inclusion of the mentally ill under Canada's MAiD regime. Now, just to be very clear, my bill does not in any way reverse the rest of Canada's MAiD regime. It is focused on protecting the most vulnerable Canadians, namely the mentally ill, who often have no one advocating for their interests. So just a little bit of context. You may recall when Bill C-14 was introduced and debated in 2016, many of us warned that Canada was treading upon a slippery slope that would quickly lead to those not at the end of their lives being included in Canada's MAiD regime, placing Canada's most vulnerable groups at risk. And we were assured that our fears were unfounded. I so remember that debate. We were assured, your fears are unfounded, there's nothing to see here, don't worry and be happy. We were assured that MAiD would remain an exceptional and extraordinary remedy for those experiencing intolerable and incurable pain at the end of their lives. Sadly, our fears were confirmed with the Truchon case and then the government's Bill C-7, which not only eliminated the foreseeability requirement, but extended MAiD to the mentally ill. I note that the original Bill C-7 did not include mentally ill persons. In fact, the Justice Minister originally went to great lengths to explain why MAiD should not be extended to the mentally ill. It was the Senate that inserted the mental health provisions into C-7, and the government accepted that amendment without protest. So let me be clear. There is no consensus across Canada that medically assisted suicide should be extended to the mentally ill. None. In fact, the government failed to engage in meaningful consultations with experts and mental health stakeholders on a variety of issues, including irremediability, competency, and the issue of suicidality. Neither did the government engage with Canadians broadly in a meaningful national discussion about what this new policy direction means for our country. Its only engagement was to strike an expert panel that was prohibited from examining the actual merits of MAiD being extended to the mentally ill. All it did was tinkered around the edges with safeguards and professional standards, but it didn't address the merits of MAiD being extended to the mentally ill. My bill will simply return the state of our law to what it would have been had the unelected Senate and compliant government not intervened. So those suffering from mental disorders, including depression, as the leader has mentioned, deserve the mental health and social supports and counseling they need to find some joy and some meaning in life. It is deeply concerning that this government appears to be inexorably moving from a culture of life to a culture of death. So my bill seeks to arrest that momentum and give the government and all Canadians time to reconsider the direction the government appears to be taking us when it comes to assisted suicide and euthanasia. Thank you very much.
Good morning. Since 2016, I have been fighting the expansion of assisted suicide to mental illness. As Canadians learn more about the government's plan to do this, they are genuinely shocked and rightfully appalled. My connection to this issue is a personal one. My husband was former MP Dave Batters. Actually, Dave and our leader, Pierre Poilievre, were first elected together in 2004 and served together until 2008. Dave struggled with severe anxiety and depression and died by suicide in 2009, days shy of his 40th birthday. I witnessed firsthand that for someone who is mentally ill, there can be a tunnel vision that makes that person want to end his or her life, even when there are obvious viable options. I still wonder if there might have been another way out for Dave, another counselor, another medical treatment, another conversation that might have made the difference. Because of the finality of his choice, I will never know. Suicidality is often a symptom of mental illness, and expanding assisted suicide to those with mental illness will deliver to them the lethal means to end their lives. Some Canadians will die before they can access treatment that could relieve their suffering and give them years to live. Even one life lost unnecessarily is too many. Take it from someone who knows. Mental illness is not irremediable. There is always hope for someone to regain their health. That is why assisted suicide should not be extended for mental illness, and it's why my caucus colleague Ed Fast's bill is important. As a compassionate society, we must give those enduring psychological suffering help and hope, not an easier way to die. I have seen the major gaps in our mental health care system, but the answer is not to provide death as a certain and final option. The preservation of hope for people with mental illness is absolutely paramount. They need support, treatment, and our promise that we will never give up on them, even when they can see no other option but to give up on themselves. Thank you.
Questions?
Mr. Poilievre, on the issue of China, how can the House move forward this week on allegations of interference?
We're calling on the NDP to stop helping the Liberals with their cover-up and instead invite and request high-level PMO officials like Katie Telford to testify about what they knew. Ms. Telford was a top-level campaign operative for Justin Trudeau in both the 2019 and 2021 elections, in which CSIS has found the regime in Beijing interfered. She should be called to testify about what she knew. She should also tell us what she knew about the candidates that may have been influenced by interference by the regime in Beijing. So we're calling for the NDP to vote in favor of bringing in those witnesses to hear the truth. Justin Trudeau has known about this interference for a decade because it was 10 years ago that the Trudeau Foundation got its $200,000 donation from a Beijing-backed donor, and ever since we know that the government in Beijing has been trying to influence and support Justin Trudeau. We need to know the truth about what he and his party knew throughout that decade-long period of interference.
À propos de la Chine, justement, vous demandez une enquête publique. Beaucoup disent que la preuve ne pourra pas être divulguée en public parce que c'est secret. Alors, dans votre tête à vous, quelle forme prendrait cette enquête? Comment ça se ferait pour concilier ces objectifs?
Mais deux choses. Nous revendiquons une enquête indépendante et publique. Indépendante, ça veut dire que tous les partis devraient être d'accord avec le commissaire qui va gérer cette enquête. Ça ne devrait pas être une autre présidente de la Fondation Trudeau qui le fait. Deuxièmement, on devrait divulguer l'information qui est nécessaire pour que les Canadiens sachent la vérité, tout en protégeant les secrets de l'État. Mais ce ne devrait pas être Justin Trudeau qui décide ce qui sont les secrets de l'État, parce qu'évidemment, il ne dit pas vrai, ou bien les services de renseignement ne seraient pas en train de donner cette information immédiate. Deuxièmement, il faut continuer nos enquêtes au Parlement en invitant Katie Telford et d'autres membres de l'équipe de Trudeau pour qu'on sache la vérité. Il devrait divulguer ce qu'il savait auparavant et ce qu'ils savent maintenant.
La question, c'est en quoi ça serait différent de... Parce qu'il y a déjà eu tout ce processus-là, mais derrière des portes closes, parce que c'est secret. Et là, on aurait un commissaire qui ne pourrait pas divulguer grand-chose. En quoi ça serait différent?
Mais on ne sait pas. On ne sait pas si c'est... Moi, je ne crois pas que tout doit être en secret. On devrait avoir un commissaire qui est capable de distinguer entre ce qui doit être gardé et ce qui peut être divulgué. Maintenant, le problème, c'est que c'est Justin Trudeau qui a quelque chose à cacher, qui est en train de décider ce que les Canadiens apprennent. Mais lui, c'est lui qui est le sujet de cette influence étrangère, donc il est dans un conflit d'intérêts et ce n'est pas lui auquel on peut avoir confiance en décidant qu'est-ce que les Canadiens apprennent de ce scandale.
Il y a trois de vos députés qui ont rencontré Mme Anderson. Et je ne suis pas sûr que vous ayez expliqué en public quels sont vos problèmes avec les visions de Mme Anderson. Et aussi, pour les députés qui ont dit qu'ils ne s'excusaient pas de l'avoir rencontré, est-ce que vous pouvez prendre des mesures en tant que chef?
Les députés ont déjà mis des déclarations, comme je l'ai fait déjà aussi.
Qu'est-ce que vous avez à dire là-dessus? Vous ne l'avez pas dit en public, M. Poilievre. Pouvez-vous le dire en public, s'il vous plaît?
I already answered your question.
Non,
J'ai déjà répondu.
M. Poilievre, pouvez-vous nous expliquer, s'il vous plaît, ce que vous pensez des politiques de
D'autres
Mme
questions?
Anderson en public?
Can we get that response in English?
English, please.
Why
Yeah,
haven't you imposed any
we-
consequences on members of your caucus who met with Christine Anderson, whose views yourself said were vile?
Well, I think right now what I'm more concerned about is the vile and racist views of the Prime Minister, who after over half of, if I could, over half of his adult life, dressed up in vile, racist costumes so many times that he cannot remember them all. I mean, you should be asking him, how many times did he dress up in these costumes? How many other times are there that we don't know about? And furthermore, we're also speaking out against the government giving tax dollars to vile, anti-Semitic racists that are spreading hatred across our country at the same time as supposedly the program is supposed to fight racism. So, thank you.
Their views were anti-Semitic, though, so, I mean, how are Canadians supposed to believe that those MPs didn't, or that visited Ms. Anderson didn't know what her views were, and do you have any plans to remove them from caucus?
No.
Monsieur, pourquoi vous répondez pas en français, M. Poilievre, à cette question-là?
But I will tell you this. I'll tell you this. Speaking of caucus, if ever I find out that any of my members of Parliament or candidates have dressed up so many times in ugly racist costumes that they can't remember them all, they will be thrown out and not allowed to
run. Pas la question en français, M. Poilievre. Madame Anderson, no, sorry, I have not received a question in English. I have not received an answer in French.
Sorry, you've had four questions now.
I didn't get any answer.
I would like it in English.
Would you like to hear that?
I would like it in English.
Yeah, I just gave the answer in English. Go ahead.
Vous l'avez pas dit en français.
Sorry, are you going to deny him the chance to answer his question?
Of course, just on Chinese interference, Mr. Poilievre, is there a compromise short of an inquiry that you'd accept, perhaps maybe yourself being briefed on top secret documents that we've been talking about? Would you accept something like that?
No, because that's a trick and that's a trap. What they would do is bring opposition MPs or leaders into a room, give them some information, and then swear them to secrecy so they couldn't ever speak about it again. So effectively, that would be a trick to try and prevent anyone debating the subject anymore. So no, we're not going to have a situation where conservatives are told that they have to be quiet about this scandal because they're sworn to secrecy. We need a public inquiry that is truly independent to get to the bottom of it, all while continuing the parliamentary investigation.
Can I ask
Last
about
question.
MAiD, just to go back to the MAiD subject today?
Yeah.
I wonder, like, would a future Poilievre government repeal the mental health extension, presuming it's going to go ahead, and would you consider the use of the notwithstanding clause in order to do so?
Well, to your first question, would we repeal it? Yes, we would repeal it. We don't believe that medical assistance in dying for people whose only condition is mental health trouble. I don't believe we would need to use the notwithstanding clause because no court has required MAiD be provided for mental health alone. So the government is going way beyond anything the Supreme Court or any other court has asked for, and therefore the notwithstanding clause would not be necessary.
Not even preemptively? Like you don't see
We don't
a role in
need
which
to.
it could be used preemptively?
We wouldn't need to because courts have already ruled on MAiD multiple times and they've never required MAiD for medical illness. So we wouldn't need to use the notwithstanding.
I want to ask on the
Thank you.
feasibility
Thank you very
of
much,
a
everyone.
public
Great to
inquiry.
do it.
How would you have a
Thank you.
public
La prochaine
inquiry
fois,
without
M.
giving away
Poilievre,
the
s'il vous plaît,
country's
répondez à la
secrets?
question. Merci.